Welcome back to another episode of True Let's Not Meet stories. And if you haven't already, check out the other installments in this series. Thank you. Number 1. Newspaper ad from hell. This situation still gives me chills to this day. I lived in a sketchy part of the neighborhood, but I never had a job outside of helping my mum. So I was very naive and gullible at the time. I was out of high school and looking for a job. I had worked with my mum junior to senior year cleaning houses, but I wanted to work somewhere else and gain some outside experience. When I had graduated high school, my mum and I decided it was time to look for another job because I needed to find some money for college. My mum loved to read newspapers, and she would get a Spanish newspaper called Mundo Hispanico every single week. I would look through it once in a while to read the comics or to see job ads at the end. One evening, I was determined to find an ad that paid well and was something else that would give me another set of work skills. I was going through the classification section at the end of the newspaper when I found what I thought to be the perfect job for me. I don't remember word for word, but it was something along the lines of looking for young females aged 18 to 25 for an open massage position at this location. Now the location they gave me was 3 miles away from where I stayed, so I thought it was perfect. I could walk to and from without having to worry about transportation, since we only had one car. Massage training will be provided and the pay is handsomely good. Our girls earn anywhere from $500 to $900 a week. I thought, whoa, what a great wage. I can pay off my college in no time. I was so excited that I fit the profile that I showed my mum the job ad. My mum wasn't excited like I was, and she had told me that it looked a little suspicious, that I should call first to see if there really was another person on the other side. So I did call, and a lady answered. I asked about the free training. How much do you really make? And where the location was exactly. She seemed very sweet on the phone, and told me before we moved forward they were doing interviews and already had other candidates on their list. She said that I should come in for an interview to see if I would make it to the second round of interviews. I agreed. She gave me the address and I looked it up. When I saw it was 3 miles from my apartment, I was so happy. I told my mum that I would be going to the interview at the set time at this location and alone. She told me there is no way I would be going alone and she would come with me. I was so mad because I wanted to do this by myself without her. Because in my mind, I thought I was all grown up and didn't need help from her. The day came and she drove us in the only car we had. Now the address the lady gave me was weird, because it took us to a motel behind the shopping plaza that was next to our apartment. It didn't make sense to me why they would have an interview there. So we just circled the plaza looking for the place. My mum got frustrated and told me to call the lady for the exact location. So I did, and she told me what motel room they were in, and that they were there because it was a safety precaution. It seemed to make sense to me. I told her that I still could not find the place, so if she could speak to my mother and tell her where exactly the place was. You're with your mother? This time her voice changed from sweet to an almost angry/panicked one. I said yes, I'm with her right now, because she is driving me. So I passed the phone to my mum and she said, hello, 3 times or so. The lady had hung up on her. So I called 2 more times, but she never picked up the phone. I was mad that this lady just hung up, and so we went back home. I never put 2 and 2 together until about 3 years after. I heard on the news that there was a newspaper job ad that had been busted, and the people charged with human trafficking. The ad was very similar to the one I had read years ago. I thanked my mum over and over, because if it wasn't for her, I could have been dead, or been trafficked multiple times. I don't know where I would have ended up. I'm so grateful for my mum. Despite me being angry at her, for coming with me, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am today. So, sweet-voiced lady from the newspaper ad, let's never meet again. Number 2. He wanted my number. I was 10. From the time I was around 10 years old till I was around 14, my parents enrolled my brother and I in a summer camp for a month of our holidays before we went to our home country for the rest. We had a set schedule we had to follow from 9 a.m. till 10:30 a.m. We were then free to do whatever we wanted on the grounds of the summer camp until it was time to go home. At 9 a.m. we had swimming for an hour. Then, starting at 10:30 a.m, we could go ice skating for a couple of hours. You could opt out of either or both. But these were the timings, and we could only do these activities during these times. Now, I love to swim, so I never skipped swimming in the morning. My brother, who is almost 3 years older than me, did skip occasionally. The reason I bring this up is because the swimming pool is where our story begins. There was a lifeguard who worked at the pool. He seemed to be the highest ranking lifeguard because he was the one giving orders most of the time. One day, when my brother decided to forego swimming, he called to me as I passed by him. Let's call him Joe. He asked me what my name was, how old I was, where I was from. I grew up in a culture that was really diligent about respecting your elders, so little 10-year-old me answered all his questions, never thinking he could possibly have nefarious intentions, until he asked if I had a mobile phone, which I didn't, so I said no. And this grown man said, "Well, can I have your landline number then?" I remember feeling distinctly uncomfortable all of a sudden. I was suddenly acutely aware of his gaze on my swimsuit-clad body. Thankfully, my parents had drilled into me never to give out numbers to strangers, so I mumbled a quick, "No, sorry," and ran off to play with my friends. After this initial contact, Joe only grew bolder, whereas at first, he never dared approach me when my brother was around before. Joe started to speak to me whenever his back was turned. I tried so hard to avoid him, but he aggressively pursued me and tried to cultivate a friendship with me, as if a 10-year-old and a 30-something-year-old had something to be friends over. However, I pretended not to see him when he would wave me over, and never went by the lifeguard station he sat at if I could help it. So he started walking over to whichever edge of the pool I happened to be resting at, and started a conversation. Or he would call me by my name, so I'd be forced to stop and speak to him, for fear of being rude. I still remember his reaction when I first wore a bikini to the pool. Unabashed hunger. It was disgusting, and I never wore a two-piece at the pool again. And the bastard never stopped asking for my landline number. It was every single time he managed to get me to speak to him. A relentless litany of, "Come on, aren't we friends now? I just want to chat sometimes. Let me call you and talk to you. I just want to be friends. Friends can talk to each other, can't they? We're just friends. Your parents won't mind." If I remember correctly, I managed to avoid giving him my number that summer. But the next summer, my brother was too old to attend the camp. It was for children between 7 and 14. I attended at 14 because they made an exception for me. They would have done the same for my bro, but he didn't want to attend anymore anyway. And so I was enrolled by myself. And that was when Joe really ramped up his harassment in his quest to get my number. It wasn't just at the pool anymore. He would stand outside the skating rink and call me as I went by. He would find me in the arcade. He would approach me as I bought tickets for the outdoor rides. And if I so much as acknowledged him, I was stuck in a conversation with him for at least 15 minutes. It was exhausting, and he would not let up. He eventually wore me down enough that I gave in and told him the number to my landline. I didn't think that he would have the balls to call. But call he did. Every single day, sometimes twice a day. The first time I answered, he acted quite normally. "Hi, how are you? What are you doing?" I awkwardly answered, but my mum came into the room and I panicked and hung up. She asked who it was. I lied and said it was the wrong number because I felt like I had done something wrong, like it was my fault this adult was pursuing me. Every phone call then on got weirder and weirder. He would croon my name and beg me to speak to him. He'd ask me what I was doing, if my parents were home, why didn't I stop to speak to him at camp today, he missed me, etc. I learned to recognize the number, so I would just lift the handset and put it back down. He would call back, and I would hang up. I'd run to get it so my parents wouldn't get there first and find out I'd given my number out to a stranger. But eventually, he messed up and got caught. He called one day when I was at camp. I don't know why he wasn't at work that day, but the supervisor came to get me and told me not to get on the bus at the end of the day and that my father was coming to pick me up. I was super happy to hear that and sat by the office to wait. My dad arrived, ignored me completely, and stormed into the office. You could hear him yelling all the way outside. Joe was eventually called to come to the camp, and my dad yelled at him some more. It took ages, but eventually my dad came out, kissed the top of my head, and took me home. I was never told exactly what happened, but from what I understood, one of my parents, probably my mum, answered the phone, and before they could say anything, he started his usual one-sided conversation. They listened for a while, put together that it was someone who worked at the camp, and his nationality. We are Arab, and he was speaking Arabic with a distinct accent. Coincidentally, he was the only person in the camp's employ from that country, so they tracked him down easily. He wasn't fired. In fact, he still worked there when I stopped going to the camp a few years later, but he never spoke to me ever again, and thank God for that. So Joe, I hope we never meet again. Number 3. Guy watches my housemate through the window and tries to break in. Close to 10 years ago, my best friend and I scored a deal of the century. Live in her parents' recently purchased and refurbished home for cheap as chips rent, so the property wasn't considered unoccupied, and their insurance still covers it. They were planning on selling their house in the country and moving closer to town in a year. But when they spotted this place, it was perfect, so they snapped it up. They couldn't be bothered dealing with rando tenants for a year, so we were offered it. It was a lovely old mid-Victorian style house, with the hallway running the majority of the length on the left side, and 3 bedrooms and a bathroom coming off that hallway to the right. At the back of the house was an open-plan living room and kitchen, and a backyard. It was in an inner Melbourneian suburb, so it was totally fenced in with 6-foot fences on 3 sides, and the front had a cutesy white picket fence. On the right side of the property, an outdoor gravel pathway was wedged between the bedroom walls and the fence line. It began with a gate in the front yard and ran the length of the property to the backyard. This is important later. My friend obviously scored the master bedroom at the front, with lovely vertically opening bay windows facing the front garden and street. I had the next bedroom, with a window facing the gravel path/fence, and the third bedroom was our study. We lived here for close to 10 months in bliss. Great house, great company, and even though the area was considered a little dicey, the location was stellar. One hot summer's night, we said our goodnights. I hit the hay and zonked out immediately. My housemate stayed up in bed to read for a bit. With just her bedside light on. She was doing that for over an hour before she heard a weird scratch on the front window of her bedroom. Initially she put it down to an overhanging tree branch, till she realized there was no overhanging tree branch. She sat frozen in fear, blankly staring at her book, for what felt like an eternity, till she heard the noise again, and again. Slowly looking up, she saw a dude wearing a hoodie trying to open her window. Looking her dead in the eyes, she screamed, jumped out of bed, and ran straight into my room. I woke up super dazed and she was pulling my hand and whisper yelling, you know the one, that someone was trying to break in. She had a tendency to be a little overdramatic sometimes, but I swear, I've never seen someone look so genuinely terrified. I went to grab my phone to call the cops, but we were just completely still when we heard the distinct crunch, crunch of someone walking down the side path of the house. We both rolled off my bed onto the floor and went completely still. Still the crunch, crunch continued, getting closer to my bedroom window. I don't know what it is about distinct sounds at night when it's otherwise quiet, but it sounded deafening. And then I realized why it was so loud. My window was wide open. I jumped up, slid the window down and slammed the lock shut just as he reached the window. He looked at me, but he didn't react at all. He just calmly tried to open the window, but when he realized he couldn't, he continued down the pathway to the backyard. I was thoroughly freaked out now, and my housemate was sobbing on the floor, looking up at me like a bunny, about to be torn apart by a fox. I sprinted to the back door, to thankfully find it locked, and ran back to my room and called the cops. I don't know what the cops knew that we didn't, but they must have broken a land speed record to arrive all of 3 minutes later, lights and sirens off. We saw them go down the side path, guns drawn, straight to the backyard. There were some noises from the yard, then a knock at the back door a moment later, and the police identified themselves. Turns out the dude had vaulted the back fence, an impressive feat, and another patrol car was headed to the next street over to look for him. The two cops at our place asked if we were okay, then asked if they could come in and look around. The cops were honestly amazing. They managed to calm us down, whilst making sure the place was safe, and I was really impressed with how they handled the situation. I offered them a cup of tea, which they politely declined, as they took our statements, and they asked if there was anywhere else we could stay tonight. My housemate and I stayed at her boyfriend's place for a few nights after that, and when we stayed in the house it was never the same. We felt completely violated and ended up moving out a week later. We never found out if the dude was caught, but there was a random stabbing a few nights after the incident at the train station 2 streets over. If it was related or not, I don't know, but all I can think is that we were so lucky that it went the way it did. So, guy peering in through the window. Let's not meet again. Number 4. Grindr Horror Story. I live in a small city in Romania, around 30,000 inhabitants. Romania isn't exactly known for its tolerance of gay people. It's not as bad as some other places, such as Russia, but the situation is definitely not rosy here either. I get on Grindr and I meet a guy, 18 years old apparently. The guy didn't have a picture of his face in his profile picture because it's too dangerous. He had a picture of a rose drawing. Most guys on Grindr here don't have pictures of themselves. We talked for a bit and I really liked the guy, and then we finally accept to exchange face pictures. I send him a selfie of myself and he sends me a picture of a guy from our city. He was cute and I really liked him. So I told him, "Hey, I saw you around the city. I didn't know you were gay too." We talk and finally arranged to meet. I had some errands to run at the tailor shop. My cousin's bachelorette party is coming up next week, and I had to adjust my favourite shirt. So I asked him to meet me in front of the tailor shop. The building in which the tailor shop is located has 4 stories. The ground floor is a clothes shop. My aunt works there. The first floor is a storage room. The 3rd floor is a barber's salon, and the 4th floor was the tailor shop. I go to the tailor shop, and then go to the clothes shop on the ground floor to visit my aunt and see how she's doing. As I look out the window of the clothes shop, I noticed there were 5 men, all of them in their late 20s behind the building. None of them was the guy I got a picture of, and none of them even looked remotely close to what the guy looked like. I text the guy I was supposed to meet and ask him if he made it to the tailor shop. As soon as I send the message, one of the 5 guys' phone lit up and he started texting. As soon as he stopped texting, I got a notification from Grindr. I'm behind the tailor shop. I went there to smoke so no one would see me. Come smoke with me. I was terrified as I realized I wasn't going to meet the guy in the picture. He tries to get me to go behind the tailor shop, and I tried to get him to the side of it. There were no windows to the side of the building, so after a few tries he agreed to meet me at the side of the tailor shop. All 5 guys went to the side of the tailor shop. I peeked my head from the door, looked left and right, and as soon as I saw my way was clear, I ran for it. So, Grindr cutie, let's not meet again. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to listen to the other episodes in this series, or try out another spooky series altogether. And don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss a scary story.